Before the bullets, before the beaches, before the most pivotal invasion in modern warfare, there was a woman, moving quietly through the shadows of Europe, feeding the Nazis lies so convincing. They planned their strategy around them. She wasn't a general, she wasn't in uniform, she was a spy, and the most dangerous kind. Her name was Elvira Chaudoir. But she was just one face in a network of double agents that included another woman, Odette Sansom, Vera Atkins, and most notably, Juan Pujol's partner agent, codenamed Treasure, who together orchestrated one of the most elaborate deception campaigns in history. These were women trained in silence, masters of persuasion, architects of illusion. And they didn't just pass notes, they helped shape the outcome of D-Day. Hitler believed the invasion would land at Pas de Calais because women like her told him so, not directly, but through carefully planted information, woven through radio reports, disguised in letters, echoed in fake troop movements that led an empire off course. In the most male-dominated war of modern history, one of the biggest victories was made possible by female intelligence, both figurative and literal. She didn't kill, she redirected, she didn't command battalions. She outthought one of the most brutal regimes in history. This episode is not about espionage as fantasy. It's about strategy, sacrifice, and the unseen architecture of victory. It's about the women who learned how to play a game they were never meant to enter. And beat it. She didn't need a battlefield. Her battlefield was the mind, and she won. Chapter 1. From High Society to High-Risk Espionage. She didn't look like a spy, and that was her first weapon. Elvira Chaudoir was born into wealth. The daughter of a Peruvian diplomat, she was raised in privilege, educated in Europe, fluent in multiple languages, a fixture of high society. To the outside world, she was an heiress with expensive taste, a woman who loved parties, horses, and freedom. Hardly the kind of person you'd expect to join the front lines of psychological warfare. But war doesn't always choose its heroes from expected places. Sometimes it chooses them from the margins, from people underestimated enough to move unseen. When World War II erupted, Elvira was in London. The world she knew of champagne and ballrooms was crumbling, and for a woman like her, the options were limited. Stay out of the way, or find a way in. She chose the latter. In 1943, British intelligence, MI5, recruited her, not for muscle, not for weapons, for access. She was well-traveled, connected to elite European circles, fluent in French, fluent in disguise. They codenamed her Dorette. Her job? To become a double agent. The plan was delicate. She would pretend to spy for Germany, feeding information to the Abwehr, the Nazi intelligence service. But the real intel? It came from Britain, carefully curated lies designed to mislead Hitler at the most critical moment of the war. She posed as a loyal informant, reported on fake troop movements, confirmed the location of Allied units that didn't exist, and most importantly, helped convince the Nazi High Command that the D-Day invasion would not land in Normandy. To pull this off, Elvira had to play a role. Most people spend their lives avoiding a walking contradiction. To the Germans, she was a willing traitor. To the British, a national asset. To herself, she had to become no one, a face that fit whatever narrative they needed, a voice that sounded truthful, no matter what it was saying. It wasn't just courage, it was psychological precision. She understood how to mirror belief, how to make her lies sound familiar. Because good deception doesn't sound dramatic, it sounds plausible. And in the quiet spaces between truth and fiction, she changed the trajectory of the war. She didn't fire a weapon, she didn't storm a beach, but when history was written, her footprints were all over the map. Chapter 2. Inside the web of deception, how she fooled the Nazis. Espionage is not built on action, it's built on belief. And Elvira Chaudoir mastered belief. She didn't win the Nazis' trust by offering sensational secrets. She won it by being consistent, by sounding ordinary, by feeding them just enough truth to make the lies irresistible. Her reports were crafted with surgical precision. Details about troop placements, naval movements, Allied morale, all carefully approved by British intelligence to support one monumental deception, Operation Fortitude. Fortitude was the crown jewel in the Allied deception plan. Its goal? Convince Hitler that the D-Day invasion would land not in Normandy, but at Pas de Calais, a narrow strip of coast where the English Channel is thinnest. The logic was sound. The Germans expected a direct attack. Pas de Calais was heavily fortified. Elvira's job was to confirm that expectation, subtly, repeatedly. She sent word to her Nazi handlers through coded radio messages, reaffirming that troop buildups near Calais were growing, that morale in Normandy was poor, that the Allies wouldn't risk a full assault there, and the Germans believed her. Why? Because they thought they were using her. That's the genius of a double agent. She wasn't trying to sound brilliant, she was trying to sound useful. And in doing so, she became part of a broader symphony of misdirection. Alongside other spies, like Juan Pujol Garcia, codename Garbo, she helped create an entire phantom army. Fake divisions, inflated numbers, bogus plans leaked through reliable sources. She wasn't working alone, but her voice was one of the most trusted. The Nazis reallocated thousands of troops to Calais. They held them there, even after the invasion of Normandy had begun, waiting for a second real attack that never came. That delay cost them the war, and it was built not on bullets, but on sentences, on false reports, on the illusion of certainty. Elvira Chaudoir had no battlefield, but her battlefield was in their minds. She didn't wear a medal, but she wore conviction, in silence, in patience, in the quiet genius of playing your enemy's expectations against them. And in the end, they weren't just fooled, they were guided by a woman who understood that war is not always won with force, but with belief weaponized as truth. Chapter 3: The Invisible Heroes, Women Who Wrote Victory from the Shadows. Elvira Chaudoir was not alone. She was one thread in a vast, invisible web of resistance, woven not just by generals or agents in uniform, but by women who weaponized invisibility. History remembers the tanks, the generals, the flags raised and fallen. But beneath those headlines were voices, soft, strategic, often female, guiding decisions with information that could collapse empires or spare lives. There was Vera Atkins, a Romanian-born intelligence officer working inside Britain's Special Operations Executive, SOE. She recruited, trained, and deployed dozens of female agents into Nazi-occupied Europe, not with sentiment, but with ruthless precision. She chose women who could disappear into crowds, speak multiple languages, convince, manipulate, survive. There was Odette Sansom, a French-born British agent captured and tortured by the Gestapo. She never broke. She survived Ravensbrück concentration camp and returned home decorated but haunted, not for what she lost, but for what her silence had protected. And there was Noor Inayat Khan, a descendant of Indian royalty and Sufi mystics. She worked as a wireless operator behind enemy lines in France. A job so dangerous, most didn't last a week. She lasted 3 months, captured, tortured, executed. She died with one final word on her lips: Liberté. These women didn't carry rifles. They carried codes, secrets, maps, lies, and the unbearable weight of knowing that one misstep could erase not only their lives, but entire missions. What made them dangerous wasn't aggression, it was adaptability. They learned to be invisible in plain sight, to lie convincingly, to make allies of enemies, to stay calm in rooms where death wore a uniform. They weren't protected by rank, they weren't honored with parades, but they shaped outcomes that men with armies couldn't. And they did it all knowing that even if they succeeded, they might never be remembered. Their war was not public, it was personal, and they fought it with silence, with subtlety, with every ounce of courage the world refused to associate with femininity. But war reveals more than destruction, it reveals truth. And the truth is this: some of the most pivotal victories in World War II were orchestrated by women the world was trained to overlook. They were not background players. They were architects of the impossible. And without them, D-Day might have failed. Chapter 4: How Misdirection Became the Greatest Weapon of WWII. World War II wasn't just a war of firepower, it was a war of perception. And perhaps no battlefield was more critical or more invisible than the one inside the minds of enemy commanders. By 1944, Allied forces were preparing for their most ambitious operation yet: D-Day, the invasion of Nazi-occupied Western Europe. Failure would mean catastrophe. Success required more than soldiers. It required that Hitler believe the wrong story. And for that, misdirection became the Allies' most powerful weapon. They called it Operation Bodyguard, an elaborate web of deceit designed to convince the Germans that the Normandy landings were just a diversion. It was a masterpiece of misinformation. Fake radio traffic, inflatable tanks, dummy airfields, actors portraying generals, and, perhaps most critically, a network of double agents feeding Germany-curated intelligence. Elvira Chaudoir, Dorette, was one of them. She didn't have to invent entire lies. She only had to confirm what the Germans already suspected. That's the brilliance of psychological warfare. You don't fight beliefs by contradicting them. You reinforce them, just enough to lead them astray. The Nazis were convinced the invasion would hit Pas-de-Calais. That's where the terrain made the most sense. That's where the German defenses were strongest. So the Allies let them think that. They staged troop buildups, sent coded messages implying Calais as the target, even leaked fake plans. Every detail was calibrated. Too obvious, and the Germans would doubt it. Too subtle, and they'd miss it. This was a dance, and agents like Elvira played the rhythm perfectly. Hitler was so convinced, he refused to move reinforcements to Normandy for weeks after the invasion had begun. That delay gave the Allies their foothold. That foothold changed the course of the war. And it was bought not just with bravery, but with belief management. This wasn't deception as trickery. It was deception as strategy, as an art form. The battlefield was language, motive, timing, and the ones who mastered it weren't always holding guns. They were holding pens, scripts, radio codes, and the calm poise of someone who knew they were shaping history, without needing credit for it. Misdirection won D-Day, not by erasing the truth, but by burying it in plain sight. And at the center of that web were minds like Elvira's, quiet, unassuming, and utterly unstoppable. Chapter 5: What Her Legacy Means for Intelligence, Strategy, and the Hidden Face of Power. In the aftermath of war, we build statues, we name generals, we write headlines about battles won with muscle, fire, and force. But what about the victories that came from subtlety, from silence, from a carefully planted lie that saved thousands of lives? Elvira Chaudoir never led an army. She never held a rifle, but her mind helped redraw the map of Europe. Her legacy, and that of the women who worked beside her, is not just about espionage. It's about the power of intelligence as a form of leadership. She didn't fight by overpowering the enemy. She fought by outthinking them. She didn't need a title to be dangerous. She needed access, insight, and the courage to play a role so convincingly. It changed the outcome of the greatest military operation of the 20th century. Her story forces us to reconsider where we locate power. It's not always in the spotlight. Often, it's in the shadows. With those who understand that what you say, how you say it, and who believes you, can move empires more efficiently than any army ever could. Elvira's work wasn't glamorous. It was lonely, morally complex, terrifying. She had to lie to people who trusted her, live two lives at once, carry the burden of knowing that a single misstep could lead to real deaths. But she did it, not for fame, not for medals, but because she understood something essential. That in war, the person who controls the narrative often controls the outcome. And that's what her legacy teaches us. That power isn't just about who speaks the loudest. It's about who shapes belief behind the scenes, who controls perception, who engineers decisions before they're made. Elvira Chaudoir and her sisters in strategy showed us that intelligence, true intelligence, isn't just about knowing facts. It's about knowing how to be heard and when to stay silent. They proved that you can change the world without needing to be seen, because real power doesn't always need a spotlight. Sometimes it prefers the dark, where it can move freely and change everything before anyone even realizes it was there. Elvira Chaudoir will never be a household name. There are no monuments to her, no school textbooks detailing her missions, no movies casting her as the hero. But she was one, not because she fit the image of one, but because she rewrote it. She didn't need muscle to change history. She needed perception. She needed timing. She needed the nerve to lie to the most dangerous regime in modern history and make them believe every word. She did all that, and then she disappeared into archives, footnotes, the silent vaults of classified victories. But that silence, it is not an absence. It is the echo of a new kind of power. The kind of power that doesn't dominate rooms, but observes them, doesn't shout, but understands when and how to whisper the right thing at the right time. She teaches us that strength doesn't always come with a weapon. Sometimes it comes with strategy, with courage in disguise, with a mind sharper than any blade. And for every woman who's ever been told, you're too soft, too quiet, too complicated to lead, Elvira Chaudoir's story says this: maybe you weren't meant to be loud. Maybe you were meant to be lethal in silence. She didn't need the world to recognize her in order to change it. She just needed to play her part so well, the enemy never saw it coming. And that is power.